After being reborn, I immediately decided to end my husband's life by removing his ventilator and burying him alive. You see, in my previous life, he jumped into the river, claiming he was in the late stage of cancer and didn't want to be a burden to me. But the truth was, he pretended to struggle and pushed me underwater, causing me to drown. Before I was even cold in my grave, he used my money to take his first love and immigrate abroad. It turned out that he wanted to fake his death to get rid of me. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day when my husband jumped into the river. I looked down and saw that the water had already reached my knees. I couldn't help but wonder how I had come back here. I couldn't believe I had been given such a rare chance to start over. I looked at the figure floating towards the center of the river, and my eyes filled with anger. Brad, this time I won't risk my life to save you, and you won't get a penny of my money. I let go of the bamboo pole in my hand, and it floated away with the current. I pretended to panic and shouted, "Help! I can't swim. Someone save my husband." Brad struggled in the water, but he managed to keep his chest above the water, which didn't look like someone who was really drowning. Although my parents-in-law also shouted for help, they tried to persuade me to go back to the shore. Their expressions were very calm, which made me realize how stupid I had been in my previous life. It turned out that their whole family knew that preventing me from saving him was not because they were worried about my safety, but because they were afraid that I would ruin Brad's plan to fake his death. Until the moment I died, I was still proud of saving my husband's life with all my might, but this man turned around and took his first love to settle in another country. Soon, Brad was rescued by several brave passers-by and sent to the hospital. The doctor was surprised that a person who jumped into the river to commit suicide didn't choke on a single mouthful of water. My parents-in-law pretended to thank God for saving their son's life. I sneered in my heart and pretended to be worried as I asked the doctor, "My husband has terminal liver cancer. Will falling into the water have an impact on his condition? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to have a more detailed examination?" As soon as my parents-in-law heard this, they became anxious and tried to stop me. I knew very well that his claim of having terminal liver cancer was just an excuse for jumping into the river and faking his death. I was so naive in my previous life that I told Brad the good news that I had won a lottery prize of $100 million. I didn't realize that I was putting myself in a dangerous situation. When Brad was sent to the ward, a doctor came in. It wasn't the doctor from the emergency department. This female doctor wore a mask and went straight to the hospital bed. Her concerned eyes and the way she anxiously looked through the medical record card made me suspicious. She also bent down and held Brad's hand. The familiar eyebrows and eyes made me remember that I had seen her before. Lily. The doctor in the emergency department said that Brad was fine. My mother-in-law blurted out a sentence, confirming my guess. Lily was Brad's first love, and they had been in a relationship for 6 years before they broke up. "Mom, are you very familiar with her?" I asked suddenly. My mother-in-law looked away, feeling guilty. Lily then realized that I was also there. She pretended to take Brad's pulse, which was ridiculous since she was a Western doctor. My father-in-law tried to act calm and said, "Lily is Brad's attending doctor. We know her quite well." Oh, so well that they called her by her first name instead of Dr. Lily. My mother-in-law took the opportunity to scold me, saying that I didn't care enough about Brad. She blamed me for his cancer because I didn't take good care of him. I pretended to accept the criticism humbly and said, "Mom, you're right. That's why I decided to transfer Brad to a big hospital in New York. We can even consider a liver transplant." When the other people in the ward heard this, their faces changed. Since they were pretending to have cancer, I thought to myself, "I'll cut your liver first and let you suffer." My mother-in-law held my hand and said sincerely, "Stella, I'm glad you realize your mistakes. But since the doctor said Brad is in the late stage, let's let him go with dignity." My father-in-law snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "Do you know better than the doctor? Don't make a fuss." I forced out 2 tears and said, "Brad is still so young. I'm just afraid that he will die young. I have already contacted experts in New York, and there is also a suitable liver donor. As long as we transfer him there, we can arrange the liver transplant surgery immediately." Of course, these were all lies to scare them. Sure enough, Lily was shocked and blurted out, "No." My mother-in-law also strongly opposed it. I looked at Lily coldly and said, "I've never seen a doctor prevent a patient from seeking treatment. Is there something wrong with your diagnosis?" Lily's eyes flickered and she insisted that she couldn't have made a misdiagnosis. My mother-in-law was so angry that she scolded me, saying that I was deliberately trying to kill her son. She said that the journey to New York would be too tiring for her precious son, and something might happen. My father-in-law even blocked the door and refused to let me take Brad to New York. I took out my phone and threatened, if you don't want to go to New York, that's fine. Then I'll invite experts for a consultation. I don't believe that Brad is beyond saving. When Lily heard the word consultation, she became even more panicked. My mother-in-law coughed and winked at her, pretending to compromise. Since Stella has already contacted the experts, let's do it this way. Stella, you can go home and rest first. I and your dad will wait for the nurse to come before we leave. Obviously, they wanted to get rid of me. I nodded and pretended to leave the ward worriedly. After leaving the hospital, I immediately disguised myself to claim the prize. I wouldn't let anyone know about this huge bonus of $100 million. I hid the money well and didn't buy anything immediately. Instead, I sold the car when I got home. Only then did I find out that the card that Brad and I had agreed not to touch had a balance of zero. After we got married, we both transferred a part of our salaries into this card every month as a family savings fund and for our future children's education fund. This bastard man had secretly withdrawn the money without telling me. I had a bad feeling and immediately made a few calls to ask my friends to help me investigate some things. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Brad, this scumbag, had originally planned to fake his death and run away with Lily. He must have made thorough preparations. Fortunately, the house and the car were in my name, and it was unlikely for him to sell them without my permission, but the unease in my heart lingered. Just as I was falling asleep in a daze, my phone kept vibrating. At 3 a.m., Lily's mournful voice came from the other end of the phone. Ms. Chu, your husband, Mr. Brad's condition suddenly deteriorated. We did our best to rescue him, but he still passed away. Please accept my condolences. I pretended to be shocked and said with a crying voice, what? How could this happen? I'll be there right away. After hanging up the phone, I couldn't help but smile. He died so quickly. I won't let him go so easily. I took something from the drawer and hurried to the hospital. In the ward, Brad had already been covered with a white cloth. I lifted the cloth and took a look at him. His face was peaceful. This was probably the best-looking liver cancer patient I had ever seen. Weren't others usually pale and emaciated? I slapped him twice without warning. Brad didn't move at all. It seemed that the anesthetic was very strong. My mother-in-law was about to come and pull me, but I threw myself onto Brad's body first. Brad, you heartless man. How could you leave me like this? I wailed and took the opportunity to check his condition. The body was warm, and there was a heartbeat. This confirmed my guess. My mother-in-law hypocritically pulled me up and said, Stella, people can't come back to life. We have to move on. My father-in-law also handed me a document. This is the will that Brad made. You are his only heir. I wiped the corner of my eye and stood up straight. They not only faked his death, but also prepared the will. There must be something fishy. I took the will and quickly read it through. I, the undersigned, hereby declare that all my debts before my death will also be repaid by Ms. Chu Xing. I sneered and pointed at this line. What does this mean? My father-in-law snorted coldly and said disdainfully, since you enjoy everything Brad left behind, you naturally have to bear his debts. They were waiting for me here. The family savings fund was emptied, and this bastard Brad must have something else hidden from me. I temporarily suppressed my anger and took out the card I brought. Brad applied for organ donation, and I have already notified the donation center. My parents-in-law and Lily were frightened and turned pale. My mother-in-law was so angry that she wanted to hit me, but I dodged it easily. My father-in-law shouted, you won't let my son have a whole body. You are so vicious. Lily stammered for a long time and said, Brad's cancer cells have spread and metastasized. I'm afraid his other organs are not in good condition either. I sighed. I asked, and they said it's no problem. We should still respect Brad's wishes, right? I'm his only heir. It's not wrong for me to make this decision, is it? The expressions of these people were really wonderful. Lily was like a cat on hot bricks, not knowing what to do. She suddenly turned around to pour us water. I noticed that 2 cups were placed very close together, and she handed them to my parents-in-law. A separate cup was placed apart and given to me. I was about to take a sip when I noticed some fine powder on the rim of the cup. Just then, the people from the donation center came. My parents-in-law made a scene and threatened to die. Lily also tried to dissuade them, because the immediate family members strongly opposed it. Even if the deceased had an application record before his death, the donation center would not force it. After driving them away, my father-in-law glared at me and said, Old woman, hurry up and call Johnson. Why hasn't the car come yet? We need to take our son back to our hometown. They had a good plan. They wanted to run away. I pretended to be surprised. Are you going to bury Brad in the soil? It takes 7 or 8 hours to drive back to our hometown. We need to book a hotel and use a professional cold chain vehicle from the funeral home, right? My parents-in-law looked at each other guiltily and didn't dare to answer. I pretended to be obedient. We also need to notify all the relatives in our hometown and let them come to pay their respects and see Brad off for the last time. According to the customs in our hometown, don't we need to keep vigil for 3 days? Under the eyes of the public, I wanted to see how they could ensure that the anesthetic effect on Brad lasted. If I could witness him being buried alive, it would be really satisfying. My father-in-law was so anxious that he started to stutter. We are not such old-fashioned people. We don't need to follow the old ways. We just want Brad to return to his roots and be buried in the soil. I almost laughed out loud. If you're not old-fashioned, why are you talking about burial in the soil? Lily held my mother-in-law's hand and hinted with her eyes, Auntie, nowadays, it is advocated to simplify funerals. Why don't we just cremate him and take the ashes back for burial? It's the same, I'll contact the funeral home right away. My mother-in-law listened to her and knew that there were other ways out, so she calmed down. This woman must be up to something again. I took the opportunity to switch the cups when they weren't paying attention. Mom and Dad, have some water first. My parents-in-law didn't suspect anything and drank the water that Lily had specially prepared for me. I wondered what was in it. Soon, they started to feel dizzy and their eyes became blurred. Lily came back and was shocked by the scene. I didn't give her a chance to hesitate. Dr. Lily, I don't know what happened to my parents. Please take them for a checkup. I'll send my husband to the funeral home. I just took the death certificate of Brad from my mother-in-law's hand. With this, I wouldn't have trouble cremating him. Lily's face turned pale and she stuttered. The procedures at the funeral home are more familiar to me. I'd better go. Before she could finish speaking, I said sternly, Dr. Lily, the procedures at the funeral home must be handled by immediate family members. What are you to Brad? Was it you who issued the death certificate? Lily was speechless under my questioning, and her expression was extremely guilty. As a third party, what right did she have to sign and handle the procedures? I said firmly, I won't delay any longer. I got on the car with the staff from the funeral home. When the car passed over a speed bump, I noticed that Brad's eyebrows twitched. Oh no, was he about to wake up? At this moment, my parents-in-law started to call me one after another. I didn't answer, and my mother-in-law's text messages followed closely. Stella, if you dare to cremate my son, I'll never let you go. Stella, we are on our way to the funeral home. Wait until we get there to talk about everything. The screen was filled with exclamation marks. They must be going crazy. I wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. I quickly knocked on the window and pleaded with the staff sitting in the front. Sir, our old people can't bear the blow and have been sent to the hospital for rescue. I need to go back to the hospital as soon as I finish the procedures at your unit. The staff was understanding and immediately told me to sit tight and stepped on the gas. I looked at Brad's face, feeling a mix of emotions. In my previous life, I gave you my heart and soul. But in return, I got your betrayal. You not only betrayed my feelings but also plotted to take my money and kill me. This time, I won't show you any mercy and will send you off myself. Originally, it took more than half an hour to get there, but the driver managed to arrive in just 20 minutes. Coincidentally, there weren't many people at the funeral home, and I quickly completed the procedures and sent Brad to the cremation room. My phone was vibrating like crazy. My father-in-law finished calling, and my mother-in-law called. There was also a strange number that kept calling. I turned off the phone without expression, so that they couldn't contact me anymore. I don't know if it was my illusion, but I seemed to see Brad's fingertips move. I was so anxious that my nose started to sweat. Just as I was about to successfully take revenge, I couldn't let anything go wrong at this critical moment. Sir, our old people have chosen an auspicious time and are eager to take the ashes back to our hometown for burial. Can you make an exception? I sincerely begged. The staff readily agreed. In the face of human kindness, other family members also expressed their understanding and allowed Brad to jump the queue. I silently prayed in my heart, hurry up, faster. The staff pushed Brad into the crematorium, suddenly surprised and thinking, hey, this thing is quite soft. I've never seen anything like it before.